Hey guys, glad to be back. Hopefully, everyone is making smart choices and, uh, uh, staying home and staying out of trouble. Miss you guys. I was up at school today and it just wasn't the same without you. I had to go grab a whiteboard and marker and different, supplies and things like that. So I'm going to jump on in. My goal is to have like 3 to 4 lessons a week, ranging on time. I'm looking at like around 30 minutes to 45 minutes, 50 minutes, something like that. But let's dive into our very first thing that we were going to get back on. Let's see if I can get rid of some of this. Okay, so fiscal policy is fiscal and monetary policy is our last unit. Fiscal policy, you guys actually already know what fiscal policy is. We've actually tested on it several times. I just didn't tell you that's what it was. It's anytime that the government changes spending, government spending, that's a G, or they change taxes. That's fiscal policy. If they're trying to shift aggregate demand, if you remember aggregate demand, it's been a while, but remember the whole spending multiplier and tax multiplier, KS and KT, and all of that, changes GDP and aggregate. That's fiscal policy. You didn't know that, but that is fiscal policy. So before we get into, we already know like what the government should do in a recession with spending and what they should do if they want to expand the economy or something with taxes. We already know that. But there are a couple things about taxes we don't know yet. So a tax base is something that is taxed. Can I type on here? Is it going to let me? Oh my. I wonder. Oh, okay. I can do that. A base is like items or something that is taxed. Oh, this is fun. I'm already having so much fun with this because this is exactly like this is smart notebook software. If you don't have the software, you have to get like this kind of crazy version. Oh my gosh. Can I make, that's interesting. Okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this bigger, and then I'm going to erase this. All right, there are 4 different tax bases. And tax bases are the things that are taxed. And you guys know a few of these, like our income is taxed. Things that we buy are taxed, sales tax. You could probably think of like, you've seen, you drive around, you look at new neighborhoods and they say like no property taxes or no mud tax or something like that. So there's property taxes. Everyone in like our class, everyone that we know are probably going to pay all 3 of these. It's that 4th one that only applies to some people because it's applying to corporations, and that's corporate income tax. So not all businesses are taxed, only corporations. So like a little mom and pop shop is not going to be taxed. They'll have an income tax on like their personal income, but the money that the business makes is not taxed because it's only corporations. So that's what a base is. Those 4 different things. A structure, if you had seen on the screen here, there are 3 structures. And what a structure is how it's taxed. How are we going to tax people? Are we going to tax everyone the same amount? Are we going to tax people a different amount? And what is that dependent on? So there are 3 types of tax structures. There is, everyone gets taxed the same percentage. That's called a proportional tax. Proportional tax. Where everybody's, let's just pick a tax structure. Let's say we're talking about income. Let's pick a tax base. Let's say we're talking about income. Our income could be like, well, everyone gets taxed the same percentage. Maybe it's like 20%. And no matter what you make, the proportional would be the same for everyone. So it's also called a flat tax because it's a flat percentage for everyone. We don't have that. In fact, I can't think of any country that has a proportional tax structure on income. There's regressive, which is kind of backwards. Regressive means that if you have low incomes, poor people, low incomes get taxed a higher percentage. They get taxed more. While that just seems a little backwards. And then like high incomes would be taxed less. So like a low income may be taxed like 70% or something. But if you're rich, you might only be taxed like 15% or something like that. And so that's, obviously penalizing the poor and taking from the poor and giving to the rich. It's kind of the opposite of what Robin Hood stood for. And there are no countries that have a regressive tax structure on income. What most countries and what we have is a progressive tax structure. You probably have heard of it, progressive. That means the higher income levels get taxed a higher percent in their taxes. So the more money you make, the larger chunk of your income goes to taxes. And the lower your income, the lower the tax percent. And so these tax brackets change every so often. Here's a picture that I give sometimes as just to represent what it looks like. So we have the different types of tax structures. I gave a definition for each of these right here. Proportional, everyone's the same. Regressive is smaller if you're richer, but progressive is, as your income goes up, you get taxed more. And I have two different people. I have a guy named Blake who makes $50,000 a year. He's a teacher. We have Susan. She's a lawyer. She makes $150,000 a year. And basically, this is the tax structure that this is actually different today because tax brackets just recently changed with the new administration. So these aren't the exact same numbers, but they were like this for like 10 years prior. So Blake, if he had, if this was last year, he would be in the 15% bracket. 15% of his income would go to taxes. So 15% of his income, which is $7,500 out of $50,000. Susan, on the other hand, she gets paid more. She gets taxed more. She would be in the 28% bracket. So $42,000 of her income would go to income tax alone. That's not counting sales or property, like for either of them. So that's not the only taxes that are being taken out. That's just for income taxes. What's crazy is that, how I said regressive is kind of messed up. It's, stealing from the poor and giving to the rich. Our sales tax is actually regressive. Not on purpose, just kind of how it happens by accident. You can see that Blake here, he makes $50,000 a year. He's going to be spending probably all of his paycheck. He doesn't have the luxury to save. So he's probably spending $40,000 a year. And let's say he lives in Tomball, where sales tax is 8.25%. Well, just in sales tax alone, he's going to be spending $3,300 a year just in sales tax. Well, okay, let's compare that to Susan. She makes more. Yeah, she's going to spend more. She'll spend like $60,000 and Blake's only spending $40,000. And so it looks like, yeah, she's spending more in sales tax than he is. But if you compare those numbers to their original income levels, 6% of all of Blake's income is just sales tax. Susan, only 3% of her income is sales tax because they are not spending, they have a smaller, marginal propensity to consume because they're saving more. Susan has the ability to save, so her NPC is going to be much smaller, which means that sales tax is not really going to hurt Susan as much. I mean, think about like tax-free weekend. In tax-free weekend, you look at the mall parking lot, it's not full of, Infinitis and Mercedes and BMWs. It's full of Fords and Chevys and Hondas. It's not the rich that are buying things on tax-free weekend. It's the poor, because taxes hurt the poor. Sales tax hurts the poor more than it hurts the rich. So, here's a question, I guess. It says, as a result of a progressive tax system, as incomes increase, the average tax rate will, if you make more incomes increase, the average tax rate should also increase. So that question should be A. Okay. So I wanted to, okay, let me see if I can do this. Can I make this much bigger? Is that as big as it can go? Because I can't write on the screen as much as I thought I would. And I guess the next video I will adjust for that while probably making the entire screen like this. So fiscal policy, we just said, is the changing of taxes and or changing government spending to shift aggregate demand. They're trying to, that's their goal, is trying to affect aggregate demand. They're trying to either close that recessionary gap or close that inflationary gap. Let's see if we guys remember. So let's talk about a recession here, which is, man, wasn't I just talking the other day, like, just in class the other day, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're in an inflationary gap and nowhere to go but down. And God, I hate being right all the time. But I didn't think I was talking about like the next week. I thought I had another few months before we slip into something, a little like this. But whatever. So here's a recession on aggregate supply and demand. Price level. Do you remember this? GDP or Y. See if you remember where the LRAS is. If this is a recessionary gap, remember? So think of this as a PPF curve. Short run aggregate supply. Do you remember where LRAS was going to be? Was it in the middle, in the left, on the right? Remember, if this is a recession, LRAS is going to be over here. Okay, so what do you want to do here? If you want to, you want to affect aggregate demand, you want aggregate demand to shift to the right, but how do you do that? So remember, you can either lower taxes, which gives people more money to spend, or you can raise government spending. I mean, if you've been watching the news lately, the current administration is trying to do this. There's like I think a bill being passed that's going to give like the average American family something like $2,000 cash. That is a huge stimulus package. Trying to avoid this, trying to get out of this before it becomes a serious problem. We'll see if that works, of course. If you remember correctly, this combo right here creates a deficit. And that whole idea of crowding out and loanable funds and all that. So this combo, or I guess this doesn't have to be a combo, but if you either lower taxes or raise government spending, the whole purpose of that is you're trying to expand the economy. So these two things, one or the other or both, is called expansionary fiscal policy. So in the past, I've said things like, if the government was to lower taxes by blah, 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 what would that do to aggregate demand? Well, now I can say, if the government was to engage in expansionary fiscal policy, which is either of these. Basically, if you see this term, just know that aggregate demand is going to increase. If they do expansionary fiscal policy in the short run, aggregate demand is going to go up. In the long run, remember, it creates a deficit and therefore like bank, the government has to borrow from banks and it can affect like long run growth. Yes, that's the problem we're gonna deal with later as we enter into even a bigger deficit than we currently are in. So just keep in mind that if they were to, okay, my stupid camera, this thing right here, my camera is like all of a sudden black and white, which I brought all these colorful markers from school and now you can't even tell. It's fun. It's good times. But expansionary fiscal policy expands the economy, obviously, the whole purpose of it. So we must be in a recession. We must have a recessionary gap if we're going to do these. So that's as if we're in a recession. If we, though, are in inflation, an inflationary gap, just the opposite, right? Price level. Do you remember where LRAS is here? Hopefully you do. Boop, 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 boop. It's over here. That's an inflationary gap. Demand pull inflationary gap specifically, if you remember that correctly. So if I want to slow down the economy, which I do, I'm in a period of inflation, I should either raise taxes or I should lower government spending. because both of those will decrease aggregate demand, shift aggregate demand back to the left, and our inflationary gap is closed. Price levels fall, GDP goes down, and we're good. We're back to good again. That right there is, I know it doesn't sound like you ever want a contraction. You never want to be in like a recession, but sometimes to avoid inflation, you gotta put your foot on the brake a little bit to slow things down before you lose control of the economy. And so that's called contractionary fiscal policy. So if you either lower government spending or raise taxes or both, you can do one, the other, or both, that's called contractionary fiscal policy. And remember, it's Congress that is controlling fiscal policy because this is government. They're the ones that control taxes. They're the ones that control government spending. So it's Congress that does fiscal policy, and they can choose either to contract the economy or they can choose to expand the economy. It depends on what they want to do to aggregate demand. Contractionary obviously lowers aggregate demand, and expansionary raises it. Okay, so that right now, I think is the only thing that, let's see here. Here's a quick old review question. It says if the U.S. government wanted to increase aggregate demand by $50 billion and NPS is 0.4, then they should do what? Well, this is look at all of our answer choices, except for one. All of them say spending, so you're probably going to be thinking about KS. And then if KS doesn't work, then I guess you're stuck here with KT. But remember, if y'all remember your KS and KT equations, maybe, if you remember, some sort of change in spending times KS gives us some sort of change in real GDP. So the spending, they want to increase aggregate demand by $50 billion. So they want GDP to increase by $50 billion. NPS is 0.4. Do you remember? KS is 1 over NPS. First off, should they raise government spending? Should they lower government spending? You tell me. So I'm going to leave this up in the air for you guys. And that wraps up our very first lesson back. Not too much. It's just a little quick review of spending and taxes and multipliers and aggregate supply and demand, and a couple of terms that we haven't heard from in a while. But hopefully this wasn't too bad. I'm trying to figure out where to stop my recording here. And there it is. Okay, guys, have a great rest of your day. That was only 18 minutes. Not too bad. I miss you guys, and I hope you guys are doing well. And I'll be doing a live YouTube session later on this week to answer any questions that I pose throughout the class. So be sure to tune in for that. I'll send out a reminder when that's happening later. All right, guys, have a great day.